Journey to the Unknown Through the Vortex. Chapter 7. First Strike. General Stanton spoke into his communication device to Brigadier General Robert Wayne. General Wayne, this is General Stanton. You are authorized to fire one round at the light entities. General Robert Wayne, yes sir, I will issue the orders to the 11th right away. General Wayne picked up his radio and called Colonel Owens. Colonel Rick Owens, this is General Wayne over at Tactical Command. Call Owens, yes sir, your orders? General Wayne, we have orders direct from the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff General Stanton to engage the light cloud entities, but the instructions are to fire just one round to test their reactions. Colonel Owens, General Robert, what if I rig up a round with a time fuse to explode an airburst and to spray shrapnel at one of these entities? General Wayne, Colonel Owens, do it, but monitor every action or reaction from the light cloud entities on camera and send the live feed to Tactical Ops Center. We will relay it to the Pentagon and the White House. Colonel Owens called his executive officer Captain Tom Evans in the lead tank of 1st Squadron. Captain Evans, I want to speak to Master Gunnery Sergeant Joe Manning on the squadron channel. Call Owens, Sarge, we need you to rig up an advanced multi-purpose round with a time fuse and on the shrapnel setting and fire it at one of the light clouds on my order. Sergeant Manning, yes sir, I will need a few minutes to get this out from the special ammunitions locker in the APC to bring it to the front position where my tank is. The round was sent to the lead tank of 1st Squadron by Humvee and the shell was loaded into the lead M1A2 tank, and Colonel Owen called up the Captain Evans and Sergeant Manning in the lead tank. Call Owens, Captain Evans, set the fuse for airburst and range it according to the target selected. Captain Evans, yes sir, we have the target locked in our firing computer. Airburst mode, 1,200 feet range and ready to fire. Colonel Owens relayed the ready status to General Wayne, who then put a call to General Stanton. General Stanton stood up in the White House Situation Room and he gave a final look at the President. President looked at Professor Brown, who nodded. Ken Harding wanted to speak and object, but the President gave the thumbs up to General Stanton to go ahead and issue the fire order. The M1A2 is equipped with a M256 smooth booth main gun and can fire a variety of types of ammunition. Captain Evans's tank gunner Master Sergeant Manning had loaded the amp round into the gun breech and ranged the target on the laser rangefinder and fed all the data into the fire control computer. Captain Evans gave the command to his tank gunner, fire. The round spat from the smooth bore gun of the M1A2 and within a split second exploded in an airburst 15 feet short of one of the light clouds hovering over a pile of car slabs. Shrapnel in the form of hundreds of tungsten balls peppered the targeted light cloud. Hundreds of blue pinpoints of light ignited from within the light cloud hit, and these lights grew until entire cloud was surrounded by a halo of iridescent blue. A series of tentacles grew from this light cloud and the glowing blue cloud began to grow larger. In the viewfinder, Colonel could only watch it happening before his eyes. The whole group of light clouds in the vicinity of the targeted light cloud started to move towards the M1A2 that had fired the round and began to close the distance to the 1st Squadron. Colonel Rick Owens spoke on the radio to Captain Evans, Evans, back up your squadron to the perimeter 200 feet back. As the 1st Squadron's M1S and APCs began to reverse, the light cloud sensed the relative velocity and position change and speeded up to head off the lead M1 and the nearest APC. The light clouds began to stretch their tentacles towards the leading APC. Colonel Owens shouted into the radio set. Tom, get your men out that APC now. The APC commander and his men bailed out from the various hatches as the tentacles contacted the APC. As the crew ran from their APC, it glowed in blue light and shimmered for a few minutes and disappeared in a blaze of shimmering light. President Walker shook his head and looked at the group that had advised him on a preemptive strike on the light cloud. Gentlemen, can someone tell me what just happened? And what do we do now? Everyone in that group looked puzzled, confused, and concerned. The awkward silence that followed gave a chance for Ken Harding to weave his way into the front of the conference room to speak. President Walker turned towards Ken Harding. Dr. Harding, you seem to know something like this would happen when we strike these entities. What the hell did we just see? Ken Harding, now in his element, walked to the computer linked to the video projector. He connected his laptop with Blu-ray drive to the video display projector, and the images from the Orlando incident and then the Tijuana incident played out on the screen. The audience in the Situation Room just stared at the spectacles of the images on the screen. Ken picked up the laser pointer and highlighted scenes flashing on the screen and began to relate his theory about what happened at the super slide. Professor Brown, Dr. Harding, let me try to understand what you are telling us. Your hypothesis is that these light cloud entities are from another star system or dimension, and the mass that they are absorbing goes through a transfer process. And where is the mass transferred to? Ken avoided answering Professor Brown and instead turned towards the president and addressed him. Mr. President, the events shown here of the super slide incident do not form the only basis for my hypothesis. I have just streamed the data from the readings my sensors took of the Tijuana incident and my preliminary analysis to the Science and Technology Council members, including those absent here, but for the benefit of the rest of our attendees at this conference, I have prepared a computer simulation of my hypothesis of what we are witnessing. Ken pressed the remote on the overhead projector and launched into his computer simulation put together with 3D image enhancing techniques. On the screen, the enhanced 3D images of the Orlando incident where the teenager Jake Carter came sliding down the super slide ride and disappearing played out. Ken walked the conference room audience through his presentation, which had been further processed with his time array and phase shift AI algorithms. It took quite a bit longer than usual as he had only a few pairs of his 3D glasses for those present. Ken, here you see the process of Jake Carter entering the annulus and the process of the mass absorption/transfer. Professor Brown interrupted. My man, what are you going on about? How have you processed those images to show what we see? Computer-generated imagery, or more likely computer-generated imagination? President Walker waved his hand for Ken Harding to continue. Ken, I rely on my instruments developed over the years of effort correlating the CERN research findings from the Large Hadron Collider, Europe and the world's largest high-energy particle collider, on subatomic particles to theoretical models that try to predict their observed behavior. But since our physical observation and tracking of these particles changed their behavior, we have decided not to rely on the direct results of the instruments but to monitor the second-order effect of these particles on other particles in their presence. Furthermore, time and phase shift algorithms are applied to map these readings. Our indirect readings of the behavior of these subatomic particles support the hypothesis that they exist in our dimension as well as in other alternate parallel universes. And before Professor Brown tries to put down what I am doing, he and others like him have been most unwilling to appreciate this novel approach of applied research on subatomic particles. Not to mention that all my peers in the academic community have challenged me to provide the empirical proof of the existence of alternate universes. Professor Harding asked Ken, Dr. Harding, your theories on alternate universes are highly inventive, and while the readings you have transmitted on the data network shows promise, I would not say that they are conclusive proof of any of your theories. Their argument was abruptly interrupted by General Robert Wayne on the intercom. This is the operations center calling General Stanton. General Stanton called back to Brig General Wayne. Wayne, what is the latest from the site? General Wayne, sir, 1st and 2nd Squadrons are reporting very strange happenings on site at LA. The light clouds, which have grown in numbers and size, could be seen to be forming clusters, and with each passing moment, they were extending their tentacles to the ground and forming what seemed to be energy ground bridges. The color of the clouds and their tentacle extensions were now all changing to a bright luminescent blue. The Homeland Security Secretary Richard Owen whispered to the Defense Secretary Ian Smith in his right ear. General Stanton joined them and whispered something to Ian Smith. Ian Smith then spoke up in the conference room. Mr. President, the Homeland Security Secretary and the Pentagon are concerned for the security of the State of the Union posed by these light entities. Whatever we do, we should not assume they have only benign intentions. Accordingly, we still recommend that we have an action plan to deploy the necessary resources in addition to the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment to the LA site. We should consider going to heightened alert FPCON Bravo to FPCON Delta and prepare to launch a full strike on these things. Back on location, the Command APC of the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment focused the multi-frequency spectrum scanner on the light cloud entities to record their extraordinary activities. They were grouping in equal spaced intervals and emitting purple light. From a multicolored mix of hues, they were now basically purple light clouds. One cluster after another began to link up in the intensity and reach of their light tentacles, now extending from the ground upwards to the sky. The energy emanating from the combined colored clouds spread into a continuous curtain of light which quickly grew into a sort of dome of purple glow measuring roughly 50 feet high and 100 feet in diameter. Colonel Owens tried to get readings on his multi-frequency spectrum viewer in autoscan mode of the ongoing activities inside the dome. But every second or so, the dome will shift subtly in light frequency and effectively block out the ability of the viewer to capture any data or visual images of the inside of the dome. In the White House conference room where the images from the APC's transmission were being displayed, everyone present were transfixed with the change of form of the light clouds into a dome covering a large portion of the LA site. President Walker pointed to the screen images and asked out aloud, "Why did the screen image flicker from something visible to static every second? What in heaven is happening out there?" General Robert called, "General Wayne, tell Colonel Owens to do something about the poor image transmission. We are getting flickering images every second, and even what we see when there is an image is of low quality. We cannot make anything out." Back at the White House, Professor Gerald Brown was quick to reply to the president's query, "Mr. President, I believe that they are blocking our multi-frequency scanners." Ken Harding, "I do not agree. I believe that this is a classic case of energy transference that those entities are exhibiting." President Walker asked, "Layman speak please." Ken Harding, "In other words, Mr. President, scanners work on two basic modes, active and passive. When in active mode, energy is beamed from the scanner's transmitters to the target object and the reflected energy is received and processed into visible images that the human eye can see and also for other non-visible radiation bandwidths to be processed. The frequencies can range from radio wave frequencies to ultraviolet and extends into the X-ray and gamma-ray ranges. Passive mode or stealth mode is when the scanner does not transmit but only captures the incoming energy. General Stanton, can you find out what mode is that scanner used to transmit those images?" General Stanton spoke to General Robert Wayne, who patched the call direct to Colonel Owens and asked, "Colonel Owens, what mode is your command APC scanner system set to?" Colonel Owens, "Sir, it is set to active mode, which gives a stronger image for signal transmission on our Combat Tactical Telemetry System, CTTS." Ken Harding, Colonel Owens, "I am Dr. Ken Harding. Switch over to passive mode and set the scanning range for the higher frequencies from 1015 GHz to 1019 GHz. Professor Gerald Brown cut in, "Colonel Owens, this is Professor Gerald Brown, Chairman of the Federal Scientific Advisory Board. Check your NBC sensors also. They should indicate gamma and X-rays." General Stanton, "Colonel Owens, please execute." Back in the command APC, Colonel Owens did the scanner setting changes and activated his NBC, nuclear biological chemical, sensors. Warning beeps of radiation alert from the sensors sounded in the APC cabin. The scanner began to pick up images from the purplish light dome which were transmitted to the operations center and onward to the White House. The projector in the White House conference room flickered into life and images began to show on the screen. The images on the screen were somehow not complete or integral. It was as though somehow the scanner was still not picking up the entire image. And Waterston, sitting next to Ken, whispered into Ken's ear, "Ken, you know what this reminds me of? I did a special program on the Hubble Space Telescope filming the stars, and the special lenses and the polarizing filters that can rotate to filter the starlight not only into their frequency ranges but also their plane of incidence. The images before processing look a bit like that." Ken stood up from his seat and asked, "And please repeat what you just told me to everyone present here." When all the scientists in the room heard her, a few of the scientists nodded their heads and smiled in agreement. Professor Gerald Brown, "Yes, it is entirely possible that the purplish light dome is acting like a variable polarizing filter that screens out light at varying planes of incidence and at alternating frequencies. We will not be able to get any clear images on all of scanners whatever frequency ranges we set them to. All we can ascertain from the NBC sensor alarm going off is that there are X-rays and gamma rays being emitted. VP Kevin Rowan, it is not clear for those of us who are not scientific geniuses." Ken Harding, "We are hypothesizing on the causes of the poor imagery we are receiving from our scanners. Let me explain it this way. From the classified fact sheets on our multi-frequency spectrum scanners, Professor Brown and I have availed ourselves from the database. We have active mode, our scanning beam transmissions are being absorbed just as the light clouds have been absorbing/digesting the solid metal mass, aka APC, at Sun Valley. And with no return energy reflections from the target, the image displayed is just of static. Passive mode, the signal strength is much weaker as only direct radiation from the dome picked up by the scanner can be shown. But it seems that the flickering purple light of the dome is acting as a wide bandwidth polarizing filter, and we get images in flicker mode between highly oscillating planes of incidence. Put simply, radiation from the dome is scrambled, and we cannot pick up any radiation of sufficient duration to process it for display. Ken Harding ran some analysis on his laptop and said aloud to all present, "My suggestion is that we assemble a team and go on site to carry out investigations. We need to get our sensors into the dome." President Walker spoke. General Stanton, Ian, and Richard, give Dr. Harding all the resources he needs to carry out the investigation. And Professor Brown, you are to go along as the chief science consultant to the President's office.